Hello, my name is Gerard Robinson. I'm the Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation, located in Charlottesville, Virginia. Recently, I had an opportunity to speak with several educators about the role of the teacher in the formation of students. One of the teachers who not only joined us, but helped put together this great crew of people, Katherine.
Thank you, Gerard. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know a number of things about you. Of course, all good stuff. For those who want to know something about Katherine, who's Katherine?
Katherine is a career educator who believes in the power of education to change lives and therefore to change the world.
And you've had a chance to be involved in education for a few years. What attracted you to education, and what gets you up every morning saying, I'm still committed to the same mission?
I actually came into education by mistake. I wanted to be in the medical profession as a physical therapist, but I ended up in education because my roommate was a library media major and convinced me to attend some of her classes. I did, and the rest is history. I fell in love with the literature. I fell in love with the smell of books in a library and the opportunity to share books and stories with children. I am a middle school educator. I spent 26 years in middle school, and now I have spent, I can't count how many years, in education policy. And the thing that continues to get me up in the morning is the opportunity to make a difference. When I was in my school, in my classroom, I was able to make a direct difference in the lives of my students as they made a direct difference in my life. In the education policy work that I do, and the work that I do with teachers now, more so than with students themselves, I still feel that I have a tremendous opportunity to make a difference by helping to raise the awareness of policymakers about the impact of the policies that they formulate on the lives of students and teachers. There is often a disconnect between what a policymaker believes the impact will be and what the teacher knows the impact will actually be. And so to be able to continue to make that kind of difference is what motivates me to stay in this profession.
Policy is really important to all of us. It basically establishes standards for curriculum and standards for entering the profession. Talk to us about your decision to work with InStory. Tell us about InStory and what impact it has, not only in the classroom, but the broader conversation of education through the lens of policy.
So NSTOY is the National Network of State Teachers of the Year, and I am a State Teacher of the Year, New Jersey 2000. And about 10 years after I served as my state's representative as State Teacher of the Year, a group of State Teachers of the Year came together and said, like, what is this? We're named, we're patted on the head, we're told how wonderful we are. If we're lucky, we get to go out and speak to some community organizations or state legislature groups, and then that's it. In the meantime, over the course of the year, we've learned so much. We've grown tremendously. And there's nowhere for us to use what we've learned to make a greater impact. And so we decided together that we would try to form a nonprofit organization for State and National Teachers of the Year and finalists for State Teacher of the Year. And after a lot of work and a lot of no's and a lot of closed doors, we were able to actually make that happen. And so NSTOY was formed. At the time, I had just moved from ETS to Pearson, and I was definitely not interested in making a third move. in a matter of months. I had had exactly 2 jobs, professional jobs, over the course of, I don't know, 30 some years at that point. And to have 3 jobs in 1 year was just unprofessional to me.
Exactly.
However, Enstoy, in its search for a CEO, was not able to find the right person. And they asked me to please come and be the founding CEO of this new revitalized Enstoy organization. And so eventually I did accept that position with the caveat that I would be able to continue the work that I had started at Pearson, which
Mhm.
was work in education research. And instead of walking away from it and leaving Pearson in a bind, I was actually able to stay on my projects at Pearson and bring more teacher researchers with me. And so Pearson
Okay.
was able to benefit, and I did not feel that I was leaving them in a bad place. I felt that I was bringing them to a better place. I stayed at Enstoy for 5.5 years. I'm very proud of that time and of the work that we were able to do in raising the consciousness of legislators at the local, state, and national level about the power of listening to teachers. I was also able, through the work that I was doing at Enstoy, to do something that's very precious to my heart, which is to elevate the teacher leadership profession. While I was at ETS, I was able to coerce some internal funding from ETS to work with a consortium of 35 very diverse, very different thinkers representing state education agencies, national organizations, educators, just 35 incredible people, but who all had their different opinions about what teacher leadership might and should be. And yet we worked together to develop the teacher leader model standards. And so at Enstoy, I was able to actually help put teachers into teacher leadership positions. And that is a tremendous hallmark to me of the work that I've been able to do.
Teachers often say, I'm glad to be in a leadership role. I'm glad to do great things. What can we, as outsiders, those who are either in policy, those who are in philanthropy, or even parents, what can we do to better support the teaching profession, particularly those in the teacher leadership position?
I think that the number one thing that you can do is listen.
Okay.
Um, in the research that I've done, I have discovered that our newest generation of teachers are Gen Zs, I guess they're called now, or
Mhm.
Gen Z pluses, are so hungry for leadership roles that when they ask us, I'm entering this profession as a teacher, where will I be in 5 years? If our answer is, what do you mean, where will you be? You'll be right here in room 204. What's wrong with room 204? They're saying to us, no, no, this is not for me. I will not stay. I'm not staying in room 204. There has to be something more. I'm hungry for opportunity to grow and develop in my craft. And that means growing and develop as a leader. And so I think that listening to that, recognizing that hunger and recognizing that the abysmal retention rates that we're seeing in our
Mhm.
profession have a great deal to do with the lack of leadership roles for teachers who don't necessarily want to leave the classroom.
Correct.
They want to stay in the classroom, at least part-time, but they also want to find ways to lead outside the classroom. So listening, um, in terms of an administrator, doing simple things like forming an advisory council and putting teachers who are hungry for leadership positions on it, something that you did when you were in Florida and when you were in Virginia, but doing it at the local level within the school building. So having that advisory council of teacher leaders helping to make and set and execute decisions at a leadership level within the building or within the district. That's one simple thing. It doesn't cost anything. The role of the principal, as Charlotte Danielson likes to say, is impossible. And to have teacher leaders who can help the principal with
Mhm.
some of those leadership tasks can't possibly be a bad thing, can it? And
No.
so having those kinds of advisory councils or leadership councils has to be something that would be beneficial to everyone, from the principal to the teachers to the parents to the students, because it's distributing leadership. Unfortunately, our principals are not trained typically in their leadership training programs in how to distribute leadership. Distributed leadership is not part of the principal preparation program. It needs to be. And so that's something else that we can do. Advocating for and initiating distributed leadership coursework as part of a principal preparation program. That's a lot of P's right in a row. I'm
Well,
sorry,
marketing,
I spit.
no, marketing has 4 P's: product, place, price, promotion. So the more P's, the merrier.
Okay.
Very good. So my last question for you, a lot of teacher leaders are not in the classroom right now. COVID-19, many of them may not have a chance to go back to the classroom as we knew it. Any closing thoughts for teacher leaders in this very interesting time in American history?
Oh my goodness, so many. But one that immediately leaps to mind is thinking about the shift in teacher leadership from the teacher leader being the more experienced 10 to 20-year teacher. Now with the technological demands on us teaching remotely, who are our teacher leaders?
Hmm.
They're our youngest teachers
Mm-hmm.
because they know the technology.
Correct.
The teachers that we traditionally thought of as our teacher leaders don't. And so it's been fascinating to watch this, to watch these teacher leaders, these experienced teacher leaders suddenly have to become students, have to become learners. And the beginning teacher who maybe mentally and emotionally isn't ready to be a teacher leader, having to accept that mantle and say, yeah, I do know a lot more about technology than Mrs. Smith, who's been my mentor. And
Mhm.
now I have to teach her. And that's going to be uncomfortable for
Good
me and for her.
good
And
point.
one of the greatest lessons that I've ever learned, life lessons that I've ever learned, is to embrace discomfort, because one of my greatest teachers was one of my bosses at ETS. And she would say to me, Katherine, are you comfortable? Very loudly. And I would look up and I would look down at her. She would look up at me. She was very short and I'm rather tall. And I would say, no, I am not comfortable at all. And she would say, good. I don't want you comfortable. When you're comfortable, you don't grow. And so this is an enormous opportunity for our youngest teachers and our more experienced teachers to grow in many, many ways. But this shift in teacher leadership being one of them. I think also, I just actually got off a call where I was virtually presenting, and one of the questions was also around growth as a result of remote learning. And I think that one of the ways in which we've grown as teachers through this terrible time has been in communication. We've had to learn how to communicate differently, communicate with our students differently. How do we build a collaborative culture when we're not together in the same space?
Mhm.
That takes a completely different kind of communication. How do we communicate with our parents
Mhm.
when we're teaching their children remotely? How do we check in with them? How do we make sure that everyone is okay when somebody doesn't show up to a remote class for 3 or 4 class periods in a row? So I think communication is another way in which we've had to grow.
Well, Catherine, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your commitment to introducing me to a nice network of very interesting people who work in and outside the classroom.
And thank you for what you do for our profession from the bottom of my heart.